Well, thank you for joining us today on the Peregrune podcast. I've been looking forward to this all week because of not only your running experiences, but also your professional background. And so maybe just to start with, love to hear more about yourself. Tell us what you do to kind of live, work, and play.
So I've been a chiropractor for about 30 years now, which is hard to believe. I don't know where the time goes. I'm a 1991 graduate of Life University down in your neighborhood in Marietta, Georgia. So very familiar with Atlanta and all of that. I love it. It's like my second home. I always love Atlanta. So it was actually during my time down there that I became a runner. So I guess to back up, I'm a chiropractor in Buffalo, New York. I should tell you that part first. My office is actually in Hamburg, New York. And if anybody's like an NFL fan and they see the Buffalo Bills, the Bills actually play in Orchard Park, New York, but it's on the border of Hamburg. So my office is about maybe 2-3 miles from the stadium. I'm on the same road as them. So close enough that when they play a Monday night game, it messes my afternoon office hours up. So they have one coming up, I think. So yeah, so I've been a chiropractor up here for most of that time. But during my time in Atlanta, chiropractic college kind of being high stress, I decided, excuse me, that I needed to do something that was going to give me kind of more energy and so forth. So I decided, I guess in my great wisdom, I'm going to join a health club. I hadn't been a runner in high school, college, anything like that. And joined a health club down in Smyrna, Georgia. And started doing that 5-6 days a week. I felt great. I was just doing the rower, I think, and stair climber and stuff like that, which sounds horrible to me now, but back then I guess it was pretty good. And then one of my roommates talked me into running. There was like a trail kind of thing, I don't know if you've been to Kennesaw Mountain, but kind of that tight dirt kind of thing, not a technical trail like we have here. So we would start running on trails, and we did it, I remember, during finals week and, times where the stress was higher. And really it was the start of it for me. I really just started to enjoy, how I felt after. I remember just being able to study better, felt better, like we all have felt with running. And didn't really start doing races or anything for a while after that, but I did kind of catch the bug as far as running goes at that point. And it's essentially been part of my life ever since. I've had some ups and downs like most people, but it's essentially been part of my life ever since.
There's a bunch of things we have in common. I lived in Smyrna for a while, and I also lived in Smyrna. If you went to Smyrna now, it looks totally different than it did in the 90s and early 2000s.
I bet.
The new Brave Stadium is in that area, and so it completely changed it. But do you remember the gym you used to go to when you were in Smyrna? Because back then there weren't many of them. I wonder if I went to the same one.
Well, you're 100% right. There weren't many, and not everybody did that. Now you tell somebody, "Oh, I joined a gym." It sounds like, well, who doesn't belong to a gym now? I mean, I'm a runner, and I still belong to a gym. When you're in Buffalo, there's times the treadmill is a must. So yeah, the gym I went to actually was Bally. There was a Bally. It was right on.
Okay.
What is that? 285. I can't remember the road there. Right there out of
Out of that's it. That's the spot. Yeah.
Yep. So it was right there.
I lived,
when I was down there, they were building a new gym on 41 in Marietta. So I had bought it in Smyrna with the idea I was going to move to Marietta, and ultimately I think I went to both of them.
Yeah, small world. I bet that Bally's is no longer there because the apartment complexes, that area of Atlanta is it's like near the Vinings and everything, and it's all just sort of merged together. It's really nice. But that's neat. That's really neat. And then my dad's family is from upstate New York.
Oh, wow.
He grew up in the Albany area, kind of Albany, Scroon Lake.
Yep.
And I remember going up there in the summertime, up to like the Lake George area, and it's gorgeous. Well, in the summer, it's gorgeous. But then my aunt would call and tell me about the 30-foot snow drifts, and we were too soft, so we came down to Georgia.
Yeah, we've had a couple of years of snow that hit 8 feet in a storm. So I live in a snow belt, actually. Hamburg is south of Buffalo. So typically if Buffalo gets snow, Hamburg gets more. So yeah, I'm even better than Buffalo. So yeah.
Well, and the last thing is the trail running is really interesting. I had never realized that Atlanta was such a big trail running community. But there's one of Peregrine's runners who I talked with not long ago who did the Leadville
Yeah.
100.
Yep.
And I asked him, I was like, how do you train for trails in Atlanta? Like, it's a city.
Right.
And he said the same thing that you had mentioned, that there's all these trails around, whether it be Kennesaw when you're living up in Marietta,
Yep.
or Stone Mountain is a really
Yep.
popular one too.
Yep.
So that's really cool that you started running some of the now like really iconic trails in Atlanta. Are those the two different routes?
Yeah, and I really enjoyed those too because they were more packed. When you run up here on trails, I mean, I love it. I'm still a trail runner now. I do both. I don't run trails quite as much just because they're not convenient for me. But the trails up here are very technical. They're very rooty and rocky, and they're very technical. My wife is a very dedicated runner, and she won't do trails. She just doesn't like them.
It's different. Yeah. I've only really have run on roads. I haven't done any trail running. It's something that I want to go do because it sounds fun. And I have so many people that have talked to me about it over the years. And I'm like, I need to give this thing a shot.
Yeah, it really is. It's a different form of running for sure. I mean, you have to, up here at least, it's a little different by you, but up here, you kind of have to shut your watch off because it's depressing. When you get done, it looks terrible. But
Yeah.
it's completely different because you have to constantly look for your foot, where your foot placement is and so forth. So totally different, but a really, really good time. I love trail running.
Awesome. Well, okay. Well, going back to what you were saying before about live, working, play, you mentioned you came down to Marietta in the early 90s, went to Lake University to start your training as a chiropractor.
Yep.
What made you decide to get started in that field of study?
I actually, when I was in my probably 15, 16 years old, somewhere in there, I actually got hurt playing hockey. And it wasn't really anything specific that happened. I just started getting back pain, and it just progressed. It just progressively got worse. And so I went to the chiropractor. I got great results. And I'd love to say, I came out of there and decided to be a chiropractor. I didn't. I actually went into undergrad with the idea that I was going to be an attorney. And I was driving home from school one day, and I was going to his office, and I was thinking, I don't really like this direction I'm going into. I don't think I'm going to like this career. And I deal with the medical legal a lot now, and I was correct. I would most definitely not have liked that career. So I just kind of got thinking, and I was like, this doc, I'm thinking, I kind of like what he does. It seems like he helps people. He's always happy, he has a nice practice. He seems to do pretty well with it. I'm like, that might be something to think about. That'd be a big career change big focus change for me as far as school goes. But I thought that'd be pretty interesting. So I went to his office that day to get adjusted, and he puts me on his table like he always did and lowering it down, and he stopped it, which was weird. These tables, I don't know if you've ever been to one, but they have like these high-low tables in chiropractic at some offices. When he stopped it, he brings it back up and he goes, I was thinking about you today. I think you should be a chiropractor. And I was like, all right, this is really weird, right? It wasn't like we were friends or, he was a friendly guy, but we weren't like talking about that so much, So it was really strange. And he went back and got me some information on it. And he actually ripped out a little ad out of one of the national publications, and it was for life. And he's like, I went to school in Iowa. The weather's terrible. You should go to Georgia. So really, I did. I called for information, and the rest is history, as they say, I guess. But it was very strange how it worked out like that. It's one of those things where you kind of go, I don't know. It's like a calling almost,
Yeah. And that's great. And so now you had mentioned you've been practicing for how many years now?
Basically 30 years, 30 plus really at this point. So I think I've been on my own essentially since 1993. So figure 31 years, not all in the same location. I moved just a little bit, but I've mostly been in the Western New York area. I think my current office, I think I've been in that area for, it's probably pushing 20 years, maybe not quite that many, but I've been there quite a while. Yeah, I've been there quite a while. Practice has evolved a lot. I mean, I have a practice like many chiropractors do, where we see a lot of different folks with, everything from the weekend warriors to kids to seniors and all that. But my focus in this office is heavily on injury and pain. We handle a lot of auto accident cases, a lot of work injuries. So that's really a strong part of my practice, and something at this stage. I'm trauma trained fellow in a primary spine care program. So really a focus on seeing these folks at the front end of a lot of the injuries and working with people in the medical profession too, as part of that. So it's something I really enjoy now, especially at this stage of my career.
Yeah, I was reading on your website earlier all the different special trainings that you had, and it had mentioned a lot of the work you're doing with the spine and a lot more. I would imagine very sensitive parts of even more evolved part of chiropractic than just maybe like a general adjustment.
It really is, and I think that's really why I enjoy it now. It's a little more of the cerebral part. I'm getting older. I'm 57 years old. My body reminds me of that from time to time. And even though I do everything possible to take care of myself, time does have its effect after 30 years in practice. So
Yeah.
I really like the part of personal injury. I like the interaction with other providers. I don't think a day goes by that I'm not talking to one of them, orthos, neurosurgeons, whatever. You can't live in a silo when you're in that kind of practice. You have to work with other folks. And that's just something I really enjoy now. I really do. And plus just the benefits of being able to help people. I mean, I had a couple new injury patients today and really bad accidents, and, just the idea they're in a bad place and to think that I can get them to a better place, that always makes me feel good.
Yeah. I think just from my personal experience, there were times when I've been, injured, not nearly as severe as a car accident, but just, where I can't run. And it's
Right.
such a daily part of my life. And if
Yep.
you can't do that anymore, it's hard not to get, a little bit depressed sometimes when you can't move like you want to go do. And so being in a serious accident like that, where maybe you're having to learn, the idea of running is probably way down the road for some of those patients is probably, that's hard. Yeah.
It really is, and you hit the nail on the head. Really, is the emotional toll it takes on them. I'll get people in the room crying, and they're not crying because they're just in pain. Maybe they are, but a lot of it is just they feel like they kind of lost so much in their life. A lady was just telling me that she was big into sounds like a CrossFit type thing. I don't think it was exactly CrossFit, but that sort of thing. And she was in a really rough accident, work injury actually, and she's like, I was doing great. My weight was good. Everything was good. And now I'm gaining weight. I'm in pain. I feel terrible. I lost all my momentum. She's like around 50 years old. And I said, well, we got a plan then. We got to get you back. We got a plan. So
I love it.
yeah.
One of the things I was excited to talk to you about is, at Peregrine, our mission is to help runners get to the starting line healthy, fit, and confident. And I think we're unique because a lot of different nutritional companies are focused on getting people to the finish line, whether it be with gels or electrolytes or things like that. And we obviously do that with the vitamins and supplements we create. But I love also when I have a chance to talk to different experts. For instance, one of our advisors, Jana Hamilton, is a running coach, right? And so she's really focused on helping runners have the right training plan.
Mm-hmm.
We recently talked with Michael Silva, who's big into running form, and he does different video analysis because, like you, as we get older as a runner, we have to pay more attention to some of the things that when we were running around Kennesaw Mountain weren't as big of a deal. So chiropractic is something that I've always been really interested in. The same thing with massage. And I think a lot of runners could benefit from learning more about this as a toolkit for them. And so I'm curious. I know you have a focus that is more on some of these traffic and auto cases and injuries. And I'll get to a question here and get through my word salad. But I'm curious if you've had any experience working with runners that have come into your practice and some of the reasons they might want to think about visiting their local chiropractor if they don't live in, your area.
100%. I mean, we get athletes of various forms. I just had two runners that were leaving to run. I don't know if it was the Sydney Marathon or something like that, but they were running in Australia. So they were leaving, going, I believe the race is this weekend, if I'm not mistaken. So I adjusted them. They came in just before they left. They wanted to get adjusted, which is pretty typical of athletes. I always tell patients the two things that athletes are always most concerned with, and an athlete's going to be concerned with the same thing everybody else is. But beyond that, they're concerned with staying healthy and performance, right? And I always tell patients, like I've dealt with, a few I don't deal with a lot of the Buffalo Bills, but I'll get a straggler every now and then. And I've had a couple other, college and pro athletes through the years, more than a couple. But I said, if you talk to pro or college athletes and you talk about anything other than performance and injury prevention, you're probably speaking to deaf ears, right? Because, they have short windows in their career. What are they focused on? They're focused on performing their best and not getting hurt, right? But at the end of the day, so am I. I'm a long way from a professional athlete, but I'm concerned with the same things. And it's just like you said, I went through a period where I couldn't run a couple years ago, and you're not yourself. So it's a big thing about, how can I stay healthy so I can do that? Because that's not something just to stay fit. It's something that's a part of me. I love the culture in running. I love being at the starting line. I love all of that. So I think with chiropractic, you can really look at it and say, can it keep me healthy? Can it keep me from getting hurt? It's a big part of that. There's a reason why every pro team, basically every college team, all these organizations, they all have chiropractors on staff. Chiropractors are on the sidelines at the NFL games. There's a reason. And the reason is because performance and injury prevention, and injury treatment, of course, too. But ideally before that, keeping people from getting hurt. So I think that's a big part of it. And whether that's a pro or an amateur, really doesn't matter. It's the same kind of goals. And that's really something I enjoy. I do have that, even though I have the big, part of my practice that is the injury side of it. I really enjoy taking care of the runners too. And I always frame that. I tell patients, everyone needs a chiropractor on their healthcare team, right? Because we manage the spine in a conservative way. Does that mean that we replace, you should fire your orthopedist, fire your dentist, fire your podiatrist? No, we all have our niche. And I'm very clear on what mine is. I'm spine. I'm primary spine care. That's what my fellowship's in. I'm primary spine care focused. So I can talk about the spine and that's my forte. But also I'm very good at triaging. So when I see things that I think are outside of my expertise, I got a friend, a colleague that I know where to send you. I always tell patients, I can either help you or I'll get you to where someone can. That's really my job. So I really see that as being the role of chiropractic, as being part of the healthcare team, and any runner who wants to stay healthy, perform their best, and even more than that, and this is becoming big to me at 57 years old, I want to run for another, I don't know, 30 years, 30, I don't know.
100%. Yeah.
So how am I going to do that? Well, I'm going to do that because I got to pay attention to diet, right? I better pay attention to diet. I better pay attention to my structure, right? I better keep my spine aligned. I better deal with that. That's a chiropractic role. I do other things. I'll do massage as well. I do all that kind of stuff. And then diet and nutrition and supplementation, all of that is part of it. You have to check all the boxes. And I always tell patients, I said, all the stuff I've spent 30 years telling people, guess what? I'm actually starting to do it now, because we get real good at telling people things. But when you're younger, you can cut corners. And I did. I'm busy. My kids are little. My kids, my son played baseball. My daughter's in dance. Just like you're saying, I totally understand that idea. I used to pray for rainouts too, because it's like life is so busy, but I found out if I cut corners, guess what I'm going to be doing? I'm going to be sitting on the sidelines,
Yeah.
So I'm really, I'm doing the foam rolling now when I used to tell people about it and all that kind of stuff. I really just do it way more diligently than I used to. I always tell patients I'm my best customer for my laser because I use it all the time because I'm always treating something,
It's completely true. And Dr. Bell, I think you're speaking to our audience, right? Because it's the same thing. Like we aren't winning races, but that doesn't mean we don't want to run and run well because it's such a big part of our life. I'm curious. So for runners that are interested in bringing a chiropractor to their, I love when you said you're part of your healthcare team.
Yeah.
Because about 2 years ago, I discovered, and this is going to sound ignorant, I discovered physical therapy. I had an injury. My running coach said, you need to go to a physical therapist. And I was like, oh my gosh. And so ever since then, I've been personally adding different people to the team because I see the benefit of all these different components.
Yep.
You mentioned structure, and I thought that was really interesting because a key part of chiropractic is getting, it sounds like the structure correct, which is different than the soft tissue work, which is massage is going to go do. So for runners that maybe are interested in beginning to see a chiropractor to start taking care of their structure better, maybe it's a general adjustment, any advice you would give people on how to get started, how to find someone, maybe what that first consultation will look like?
Yeah.
I think that would be not only selfishly interested in that.
Yeah. Well, I think that's a good question. And I think, for a lot of people, I for some reason, I seem to get a lot of patients who have never been to the chiropractor before. And there can be somewhat of a fear factor with it, because people just don't know what it's going to entail. But I'll say that chiropractic is arguably the safest form of in the healing arts, really. I mean, chiropractic, the track record of safety is unprecedented, really. Chiropractic is extraordinarily safe. I think when choosing a chiropractor, like a specific location, like where am I going to go kind of thing, I personally love referrals. I mean, that's a big part of my practice is getting referrals, and sometimes referrals from other healthcare providers. I mean, both of the new patients I saw today for the accident side, both came from a neurosurgeon. So sometimes you can get the referrals from people in other healthcare disciplines. They'll know somebody, that sort of thing. But I think a referral is always the best. I sometimes will struggle with that because at this time of year coming up, I'll have a lot of patients that'll ask me for a chiropractor in Florida, because they're getting out of Buffalo for the winter. So I tend to do that a fair amount. I have enough connections. I can usually find somebody. But I'm a big fan of referral, not just in chiropractic. I feel like that in every aspect. And you were saying before about, physical therapy, when people say, should I go to a chiropractor? Should I go to a physical therapist? It's two different professions, right? I mean, one doesn't replace the other one. And I have a physical therapist. In fact, he texted me a minute before I called you. He's a real good friend of mine. He's actually a chiropractor and a physical therapist. So he started out as a PT and then he became a chiropractor. He and I are good friends. If I have questions about PT, I text him, I call him, I go to his office. He's helped me with some injury recovery. I'm always a big advocate of PT. I think PT can be incredibly beneficial. And I always tell patients anything that leads away from drugs and surgery is our friend,
Yeah. I think you outlined it well, because there was a time where I personally would have thought all those professions are together, but now it's very clear and it's very obvious to me. And I think the more people learn, the more they see that, there's benefit to soft tissue work. There's benefit to strength training and stretching and finding imbalances, and then doing something about it. And there's benefit to your structure, right? Pinching nerves, having like all those things kind of matter when you're stretching your body as much as we are as athletes, because we're weird in the sense that most people probably aren't running multiple times a week.
It's true. And I always tell patients too, and this holds true for my profession, physical therapy, or any other one. If anybody kind of has like a turf war kind of mentality where it's like, you got to come to me, I'm doing everything, I'm the answer, don't go to other places. That's not someone you want to stay with. I don't care if that's chiropractic, if that's PT or whatever, because I'll tell you, as someone who deals with the complex injury patients and that sort of thing, I am so thankful for my friends. I mean, literally, I talk to someone every day, whether it's in sports medicine or, again, the surgeons or whatnot. These are people that I rely on. I rely on their expertise. They'll do favors for me when I need it. None of us should be living in a silo. And if anybody acts like they have all the answers, I'd be suspicious.
Yeah. Well said. I'd love to ask you a few other questions about running, unless there's anything that I should have asked about runners and chiropractic that maybe you want. Is there anything else that I missed?
No, I think the idea just that runners should absolutely, look into chiropractic care, I think is a given. I can't imagine personally not going to the chiropractor. It's, I schedule appointments because I need to make sure that I don't fall off the wagon too, because I can be too busy to make appointments just like everybody else, So I need to make sure that I get there and do that stuff. But no, I think just the emphasizing the point really with the audience, just the idea that, they should look at chiropractic as something, that's necessary for them, and just adding it again to the healthcare team, not replacing anything, just adding it.
Yeah. And I think that's why I think this is going to be a great conversation to get out, because I think I have a fear factor. Like I think that is a real thing. Like, maybe we've seen videos on YouTube and it looks really great and relieving, but there is a fear factor anytime someone is working on you. And I think it's great to, I don't feel that right now. And so I think that's helpful. So people
Well, I
can
think
actually start objectively looking at it.
I always tell patients, and it's kind of funny because, some people will come in and just flat out tell you they're afraid of you, and that's helpful. Sometimes I can pick it up in body language, that sort of thing. But I always tell people, I'm like, it's natural to have a fear of the unknown. You don't know
Right.
anything about it. And my job, part of my job at least, is to turn the unknown into the known. So before we do anything, I'm going to tell you why I'm doing it, what I'm doing. It doesn't make sense. Is this something you want to do? So I'm going to give them all that information. And, if I have somebody that just doesn't seem like they're quite ready to start or have doubts, I'll encourage them to wait. I'm not going to ever pressure anybody. I want them to make a decision that they're comfortable with. But I really think it comes down to the unknown. And you can see crazy stuff sometimes on YouTube that, honestly, you should be scared. I mean, some of the videos are like, I don't know where these people live that practice like this, but some of this stuff you should be scared of. But I'll tell you what, I've been to a lot of different chiropractors through the years. I've known many of them. I mean, some of the chiropractors I've met are just incredible. There's some amazing practitioners, extraordinarily intelligent people. You just got to find them, and there's plenty of them around there.
Yeah. Referrals, and like you said, nobody's been in business for 25 years if they're not good at what they do. So that's a testament right there.
Yeah, I think experience. I think the longer I'm in practice, the more I realize that. I heard a long time ago that practice graduates the real doctor. That you really become the doctor when you graduate. After you graduate, when you have the experience in practice, and it's so true. I learned something. Probably every day, every week for sure. There's always different things to learn, and I guess when that day stops, I'm in trouble.
Yeah. Let's see. Okay. Here's a fun one. So, Dr. Bell, can you think about, I love to ask people this, what is your best running memory?
That's interesting. How about that? It's so weird. I really pride myself on being a positive person, but my biggest running memory is negative. I missed Boston by a minute.
Oh,
like 10 years ago. So I'll just tell you that story quick because it's just, I'm going to revisit it at some point, but essentially I'm not really a marathon runner. If you look at my times and how you can do like race predictors and stuff like that, I'm definitely much faster at a 5K, even up to a half marathon than I am at a marathon. But the year, it was 10 years ago and it was Erie. And I had the idea I'm going to, get a Boston qualifier. And if you look at my race predictor times and stuff, I probably should have been in the 3:10, 3:15 department. But Erie's 2 laps around. It's Presque Isle. It's Erie, PA, for folks who might not know that. Presque Isle, it's 2 laps around, known for Boston qualifiers. So I did the first lap, which is a half marathon, and I looked at my watch and I said, I am spot on with what I need, and I am in big trouble because I could just tell I was not having a good day. I was working really hard to get there. So long story short, I got to like mile 18 or 20, the proverbial wall. And I'm like, that wasn't a wall. That was like, the engine blew, all this kind of stuff. And I even got that. I've never had it before, but I got that marathon mind thing going on, So I'm running and I kept thinking I'm going to get a 5-hour marathon, And I was like, not that there's anything wrong with that, but obviously that wasn't why I went there. Long story short, I got, I don't know, like a 3:26 or something like that. So I missed it by like a minute, but it was just, it was a tough one in that sense. But for me, I'm just, like I said, I'm just not, I don't know, marathons in me. I tend not to have my best moments there. If I was going to say my best moment, I would probably say my first marathon. It was Columbus, Ohio. I had done a half marathon a month before, and I said this was 1998. So, I was pretty new in the whole thing. I had done a half marathon a month before, so I made the brilliant decision that I can do a half, I can do a whole, right? So we all know
makes perfect sense, right?
the flawed running logic that is, right? But I guess ignorance is bliss, and probably being younger helped too. And I finished it. I remember the feeling of going over the finish line, and that sort of thing. And I remember another one too, when my wife, when she did her first half marathon, we ran it together, and that was pretty cool too. And now she's a runner, and she's great too.
That's great.
Yeah.
Can you tell me about, so you're not just a professional runner, you have your business, your practice, your family, etc. What is the hardest part about fitting running in with all the things you have going on in your life? And how have you found you're able to do that?
Well, one of the things I really love about running is it's such minimal equipment, right? So for a while when I couldn't run, I went for a period of time with some injury situations and I couldn't run. I couldn't believe how much time it took to get your bike ready, to get your stuff together, to get out on the bike. It was just such a time eater. And that's the good part with running is I can run out the door, get a quick run. I don't need a lot of equipment. So for me, in a couple days a week or a few days a week, I usually will try to get out first thing in the morning. I'll try to do that. Monday, Wednesday, Friday, and most chiropractors' offices are the busiest. And for me, that's true as well. So my goal with Monday, Wednesday, Friday, I always say I'm tentative running plans on Monday, Wednesday, Friday. So I try to get out at lunchtime. And my goal is to get out 1 out of 3 of those because that's about as good as it's getting with my practice. If I can get out 1 out of 3, I've hit gold. And then I run all the other days. So I'll run 5 days a week typically. Usually right now been doing a little longer runs. I was kicking the idea on doing a marathon this year and just don't have the time to do the long runs. So I'm going to do a half, end of October, I'm doing the Niagara Falls, Canada half marathon. So that's coming up. Yeah.
That's really cool because you go over the bridge between the countries.
You used to. They changed the course. So I did the full marathon right after 9/11. And that's when they changed the course because they didn't want to deal with the border. They didn't want to deal with the border at that point because things were so, up in the air. I mean, you think of 9/11. This race was 6 weeks later, So it was pretty recent right after that. So at that point, they moved it all to Canada. And I guess, like I said, I'm only doing the half, but my understanding is this is a different course than that was, and that they've changed it a few times. So I guess it goes down to Niagara Falls to the actual falls, and then it comes back. I'm not sure exactly all the ins and outs of it yet, but it's exclusively in Canada now.
Oh, that's really cool.
Yeah. But it used to go over the border, like you said, that it was a point to point and it started in Buffalo and ended at the falls in Canada. Yeah.
Like it. Speaking of teams that help you on your running, Dr. Bell, are there any favorite running brands you have that you have found have been helpful to you over the years in running?
Brands, you said?
Brands, yes.
Yeah. So that's, it's funny because that's kind of changed for me. And I think, it's always kind of evolving. I'm not necessarily super brand loyal, but I'll say right now, I train in Hoka's. Which I wouldn't have, one of my running friends laughs at me all the time because I used to be much more on the minimal side of things, but I train in the Hoka Mach 6. They're not super cushy. I really like them, actually. They're one of the nicest training shoes I've run in some time. I feel like I can do a little speed work in them if I want to. They're perfectly fine on a long run. They're just a nice shoe, very versatile. So I'm really happy with those. But for the races and so forth, the 5Ks and the half marathons when I do it and all that, I run in the fancy Nike. I do like those. So I do like the carbon plated vapors and so forth. Those are really nice. I have to say I was skeptical until I bought a pair, and then I'm like, they feel pretty good when you put them on race day. I got to say it. That's my toy. I don't have to buy a $5,000 bike. Give me a couple $100 for shoes,
Yeah, there's a great article that mentioned the ideal way to train is the way that you're doing it, which is train in your normal trainers and then save the carbon shoes for race day, because then you're really it used to be like, I've been running long enough where we used to race in road flats.
Yeah, right.
And that was the great thing about it. Like you would hurt afterwards.
Right.
But it didn't weigh anything. And so you just felt so fast. So I like that approach too, is that you train with the shoes.
Exactly. It's exactly what I used to do. Same thing. You had the special shoes set aside, but yeah, these are much more legit. I actually, I really like putting them on. It just is, I don't know. It gives you that extra boost. It's race day, let's go,
Let's go. Absolutely. Let's see. All right. So just a selfish question. I know you have been taking Peregrine for a while now. I'd love to hear about your experience with taking the product, any feedback you might have, how you first discovered about us.
Yeah. Well, it's kind of funny how I first discovered because it ties perfectly into running. In the spring, we went and did the Capital Cities Half Marathon in Columbus, Ohio. And you probably hear Columbus, Columbus, Columbus. Columbus is about 5 hours from here. Running races there is really nice because they're typically flat. They have a great running community there. And it's just something over the years my wife and I have come to enjoy. It's a nice little road trip. It's easy, and the races are always nice. We love the Columbus Marathon, Columbus Half and stuff. So she's done them
I've done
as
the
well.
Columbus Marathon. When
Oh,
I lived in Cincinnati, I drove up to Columbus and did a great race.
yeah, it's great. I've done it a couple times. I've done the half a few times. We just did an Ohio State 4-miler in the spring, and that was cool. It finished in the football stadium, and that
Yeah.
was a lot of fun. That was probably my favorite race I've done this year. That was a lot of fun. So we did the Capital Cities Half Marathon in the spring, and it was warm in Columbus that day. It was the end of April. And it was maybe even a little hilly by Columbus standards, I would say. A little different course. I didn't know that they even had anything but speed bumps in that town. But it was a little bit hilly. It went around the stadium and that sort of thing. So nice course and everything, per usual. But suffice to say, I didn't have a good day. My wife ran it. We didn't run it together, but she ran it as well, and so did our daughter. And everybody kind of felt the same way. Like it was like a death march to the finish line. I got like a mile from the finish line, and it was uphill a little bit. And I'm like, "Are you kidding me right now?" So it was just one of those days. I just didn't have my A game. I got to about mile 8 or 9, and I thought, there's no PRs to be had today. So it was one of those days. So we're sitting in the hotel room after, and quite a while after, we're just kind of waiting. We're going to go out to dinner. We're hanging out for another day. And I was just scrolling through my phone. I don't remember what I was looking at, what I was on, but I see this thing for runner's vitamins. And I had been thinking, like, I really need to kind of, tighten that up a little bit as far as taking vitamins and that sort of thing. Believe it or not, despite my profession, I've always been kind of up and down on taking vitamins. I'll take them. I won't take them. My wife has always been much more consistent that way than I have. So I saw it, and when I first saw it, I was totally cynical. I'm like, "Oh yeah, here we go. They're for runners. Okay, this is what's this about?" But then I started reading, and I read the story of it and how you started things, and then I read independent testing, certification, third party, and I was like, "Okay, we're gonna take a look at this." And before we went out to dinner that night, I ordered them because I'm like, "Okay." A lot of people don't realize that industry is pretty much the Wild West, and you really just don't know what's in some vitamins and, basically the quality of them. So when I read all that, I'm like, okay, this is really great. So I'm gonna buy one of them and see what happens. And when I first took them, I was telling my wife, I'm like, I'm not suggestible. I'm probably the opposite of suggestible. I'm probably a doubting Thomas because of so much so much I get exposed to that turns out to be nonsense. I've seen so many trends and things, and I tend to probably be the opposite, probably more doubting Thomas. But I took the vitamins for the first time, and I'm like, I feel better when I take them. Like I told my wife, I'm like, these vitamins, I'm like, I don't know, I feel better. And I've had an issue in the morning a lot with vitamins that they make me nauseous. I have a big problem with that. I've always had a big problem with that. And that kind of led to me being a little bit up and down on taking vitamins. Because if you don't take them first thing in the morning, you forget to take them. I try to take them at the office. I'd forget them, and put them in my running bag and forget them. And that was a lot of my issue. So I got daring and I took them in the morning and I felt great. Nothing negative, and I felt great. I actually felt like they kind of almost like perked me up a little bit. And I was like, these things are great. And I've had vitamins that made me feel better, but they always had that backdrop of the nausea. I had that with some liquid vitamins. I liked the way they made me feel, but I got some really bad nausea and I wouldn't feel right for an hour or two after I took them. So none of that with these. And I felt immediately better. And then I don't know, I think I just kept ordering your stuff. So I got the glucosamine, I got magnesium, and I got the omegas. Because I'm like, you know what? Once I know that a product's quality, I'm gonna go with it. And I'm like, you know what? This is just what I'm gonna do. And the glucosamine, I did a certification in nutritional pain management. You might have saw that on my website. It was at Harvard, but it was put on by one of the national pain management groups. And they went through a lot of the research on supplements and diet and so forth and what could be good for people in pain. Glucosamine did very well. And
Yeah.
I came and they were talking studies, 5-year studies and things like that. And I came out of there thinking, why am I not taking it? You know?
Yeah.
And then it still kind of became one of those, I take it and I don't. But now I'm on auto ship with you, so I get it all.
Awesome. Well, thanks for sharing. That's great to hear. I hear that a lot, which I think is always always kind of fun to hear from people, because it's neat. It's a lot of work to do all that extra testing.
Oh, yeah.
I think if I had ever told you the full story, like when I started it, I was never trying to start a business. I was just making it for myself.
Right.
And so I was like, well, I care about those things. And so that's what I did. And then just started selling it, and then have met runners all over the US now, which is kind of wild. So really
Well,
cool.
there's a funny like anecdote to this too. My wife, I don't know, she called me or texted me one day, but she said, "Hey, I ran out of my vitamins." And I said, "Oh," and she's like, "I had a couple of years." And I'm like, "Oh boy, here we go." And she goes, "I really like the way those made me feel." And I
Yeah,
said,
that's great.
"See? Yeah." And I was like, I never really told her much about it. I don't remember really saying much about them. You know, it's vitamins. I'm not going to, necessarily say a lot to her about it. But I thought it's funny that she had the same experience. And, and I would say same thing for her. I don't think she's suggestible either. She,
My
products I
wife
take.
says the same thing. She takes it as well, and she's not a runner. She's active. She plays tennis. She's like, "Oh, you should." I'm like, "No, runners are fine. This is enough people to kind of wrap my head around." So that's good.
Well, and I think that's a good point. Like I'll tell patients, I've recommended the vitamins because people ask me what I take, and I've recommended them. I've told them to go check it out, and they're like, "Well, I'm not a runner." I said, "Well, really, that's just to suggest it meets the nutritional needs of runners, which is pretty high.
Right.
If you don't, it's going to meet your needs too. you know, so it's not
Yeah.
like they're not going to be beneficial.
Very true. Okay, last question, and then I'll let you go. What's you mentioned a little bit before, but what's kind of next? What's next? What big goals do you think you're going to chase next in running?
Well, I don't think I'm going to be able to rest until I get a Boston qualifier. I think
Okay.
that's my burden. So I think I'm definitely going to do that. I'm really big into. I really enjoy the age group part of it. Part of it for me with running is I always feel like I need a race to be training for. If I don't, I don't know. Getting out in a Buffalo winter to run for no apparent reason is tough. You know, but if I know I have a race, and then I think about the people that if I don't run who are going to beat me, then that gets me out the door. So it's always kind of been like that. So yeah, I think the Boston qualifier, was thinking about this year, but I think hopefully next year will settle down for me a little bit. I didn't mention my son is a senior in chiropractic college. So he's not in Atlanta. He didn't want the busyness of Atlanta, so he chose Spartanburg, South Carolina. So
Yeah.
just down the
Well,
road.
that's not exactly a sleeper of a town. There's a lot of
No,
things going on up there.
it really is. He likes it a lot. He's close to Greenville and so forth, so it's real nice. For me, I'll take Atlanta. I'm a big Atlanta fan, but he likes where he is. So yeah, he's going to be with me on his externship beginning pretty much over the winter. So hopefully, as he kind of gets integrated into things a little bit, it'll free my time up and give me a little more time to where I can have predictability for my running. So yeah, I really want to get that Boston qualifier hammered down. I think I want the qualifier more than I actually want to run the race. I just need to know that I could do it.
Yeah. Well, if I can ever help, let me know when he comes to that time. We'll have to get you set up with Janet, because she has coached. She was voted Atlanta's best running coach.
Oh wow.
And she frequently contributes to Runner's World magazine, but her list of Boston qualifiers, like in our age group, is good.
Well, I think that's the neatest thing about running is that you have that age group thing, and it's like you get to be 60, so what? You're in a new age group now, and I think that's really great. I just think that's one of the best parts. I always said I love the community part of running. Just you go to the expos, you're hanging around runners. It's just a great group, and I just like the idea that there's always a new age group.
Yeah. Well, awesome. Well, Dr. Bell, thank you for your time. This was a great conversation.
My pleasure. Anytime.